Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sven and I hope you're doing great. You might have already heard the news, Blackmagic Design released a new beta version of DaVinci Resolve, so I wanted to highlight some of my favorite features that come with 21 beta. Before we begin, as with any new version of Resolve and beta versions in particular, you should give it some time and wait until you actually upgrade. You should never upgrade to a beta version if you're currently in a project, and only ever install it on a second machine for testing purposes. That being said, let's have a look at some new features and improvements. Let's start with the biggest one first, well, at least in my opinion. When you're working on bigger shows for theatrical releases, home entertainment and web, you have to deliver the same show in different formats. Each deliverable is in a different color space and maybe even a different aspect ratio. Previously, we would have had to grade everything in a color management system like ACES or RCM, and then duplicate the timeline or the project with different output color spaces. Because sometimes there are still some clip-based adjustments needed that are different for each output. This always meant that when there are some changes like new VFX versions, some late re-edits or grading adjustments and QC fixes, you would have to do the same operations over and over again. Resolve 21 now introduced the Multimaster trim manager in order to fix this problem. It allows you to set up so-called trims that can be different in resolution, output color space and even allow clip-based adjustments in the node tree. You can set it up by clicking on Color, Multimaster Trim Manager and then adding new trims. Once you're done, you can select the desired trim over here in the 3-dot menu and add any modification that is specific to this trim on just this clip, before and after the current group, and on a global level before or after the timeline grade. It looks a bit complicated at first, but trust me, it is definitely way easier than working with multiple timelines. In the Deliver page you can then also select the trim you want to render and create render presets for each deliverable. You can technically also use this feature to create different deliverables for your social media. For example, create one trim for the widescreen 16:9, one for vertical 9:16 and one for 4:5. Now when you need to reframe a shot for a specific trim, you can just add a transform OFX on this clip on this specific trim and the other versions will not be affected. The idea behind these trims is quite similar to the node sig layers that were introduced in Resolve 19. And I have a full-length, in-depth video about those here on my channel, just click the link above or in the video description. While we are at node sig layers, there are 3 new mini updates on those. First of all, you can now use up to 8 layers if you want to. You will be able to see the selected layer in this new window down here, and you can also hide this in the 3-dot menu. And also it is now possible to switch between the layers via a keyboard shortcut. Simply open the keyboard customization dialog and look for a node layer to assign a shortcut to each layer. If you work with ACES or RCM, you can now also select the output color space for the current render job. This is incredibly helpful when you're pulling VFX or creating archival masters like GAM or NUM that are required for platforms like Netflix, Disney, etc. And if you want to know more about this topic, I have a full video about how we set up projects for Netflix. Going back to the color page, another highly requested feature is finally here: Render in Place for the Magic Mask. Once you finish tracking the magic mask, you can select Render in Place and Resolve will automatically render this matte, re-import it into the color page and connect it to the current node. This way you don't lose the matte with the render cache and you will get a better performance. Groups in Resolve have always been a great way to adjust multiple clips at the same time. But if you wanted to try a different look based on the current look, it was rather cumbersome to do this. You either manually created the same group twice or used some layer mixer approaches with turning on and off individual nodes. Now with Resolve 21 you can simply add versions to each group and switch between those. The last few updates on the color page I wanted to talk about are in the scopes and the film look creator. If you work with HDR Scopes, you can now adjust the scaling of the parade to a desired range. Usually we deliver HDR content up to 1000 nits, so having the scopes show a range up to 10,000 nits is not necessary, and in fact it only makes it harder to see anything. The film look creator received some minor updates. First of all, there's a new look preset and core look called Aurora, and also the fade control now has a second slider for the shape of the roll-off. And if you're using the film gate, you can now also adjust the softness of this gate. Now let's look at a few improvements to the edit page. The first one being that you can use a tabbed layout in the media pool so you can jump between bins faster. If you find yourself going back and forth between the same 5 bins in a big project, you can simply add those bins as tabs and have them right next to each other. For keyframes in the edit page, there are now a few additions like the new looping options. You can loop or ping-pong keyframe animations easily with this feature. When you import a DRT into the project, Resolve will now ask you if you want to use the project settings for this timeline or use the custom timeline settings on import. Subtitle, search and replace. A feature I've been waiting for way too long. When you create subtitles in Resolve, you now have the ability to search and replace text with this icon up here. This is really helpful when you create subtitles with the AI in Resolve, because with some words like Asus, DaVinci, Ari or other names, it sometimes transcribes them incorrectly. So this is a welcome addition to help clean up spelling errors. You might also notice something else changed in the timeline window. I usually work with the smallest settings possible, which has always been a bit tricky when editing audio, because it would disable the waveform preview. In Resolve 21 you can still see the waveform in markers even at the smallest stage. And this is why the clip names now have this dark backdrop, so the white text remains readable on top of the waveform. If you don't like this, you can easily disable the waveform preview here or hide the clip names here. So let me know your favorite feature from this release and let's discuss what you want Resolve to implement in the future. I purposely did not talk about all the new AI features or the photo page because that would have been just way too much for one episode. But I'll link a few videos of my friends in the video description. If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing to not miss on upcoming episodes. And until then, I'll see you in the next video.